Let's continue with that story. Of course, that massive fire that ripped through a five-storey building in Marshalltown has left over 70 people dead. To respond to this tragedy, I'm joined by ActionSA leader Herman Mashaba. He is a former mayor of Johannesburg. And I remember at some point, Mr. Mashaba, this was one of your concentration points in terms of dealing with hijacked buildings in the city of Joburg. It's under the ownership of the city itself. Was it still under the ownership of the city while you were mayor? This particular building?
This particular building, I just learned when I was there this morning. I'm actually from town that this buildings belong to the city. It's one of many buildings, some obviously owned by the city, some owned privately owned. Some of them you cannot even find the owners. It is for that reason I went on that massive project of expropriation of buildings where we could not find the owners. Where we could find the owners, we'll hold them on terms to ensure that they refurbish them, or we as a city take them over. So it's you know, when this morning I heard the news just at 6 o'clock when I got up, 10 people went to have a shower. 10 minutes later, 23, and the number has been going up. The latest figures are 73. And I'm saying to myself, is this an accident? I'm not prepared to accept this is an accident. Because an accident is something that happens in an event where people did not really know that something like this would happen. Yeah. This, for me, honestly, I regard this as culpable homicide because we... On
the part of who?
I think... from national government, actually. National government in the sense that on the 1st of December 2016, during my 100 days as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, I highlighted this to South Africa, that we're sitting with a crisis. At the time, as a mayor, discovered that the city was sitting with over 300,000 housing backlog, excluding the students, 300,000. The housing not being the competency of the city, the grants that we get to build RGP houses for people as a city, the most you'll ever get, you'll build 2,000 houses. So I realized we've got a problem. During my 100 days as a mayor, briefing residents, I then brought the issue of hijacked, derelict and abandoned buildings to the attention of South Africans that I personally believe the only way we can address the risk and living conditions of the residents in these buildings is to actually take them back, get the private sector, because as a city we did not have the balance sheet to convert them ourselves. Let's get the private sector involved. And because at the time, when conducting raids into these buildings, 80% of the inhabitants would be undocumented foreign nationals. But then all of a sudden, I was attacked and unleashed massive, vicious attacks against me that I'm xenophobic and so forth. Unfortunately, this problem could not go away. But I then obviously went all out to ensure that we expropriate these buildings. By the time I left after 3 years, we had already passed through council 154 of these buildings to bring in investment in the city.
Tell me something, Mr. Mashaba. You confirmed that you found out today that this building is actually owned by the city. How does a building owned by a municipality become empty, abandoned, and then people get into and hijacked? How does it come to that?
Well, it's a very important question you are asking, Masiko, because when I took over as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, with all these hijacked buildings, abandoned buildings, we needed to obviously take them back. But then you had NGOs and so-called human rights lawyers, including national government, actually being against what I was doing. Remember, the eNCA actually reported me to the Human Rights Commission for foiling xenophobia when I was addressing the challenges that we were facing. So if there's no political will to deal with this matter, unfortunately the situation can only get worse. And it is going to get worse until such time that there's a political will to deal with this matter. Because as far as I'm concerned, I used to call when I was the mayor to say, big metros like the city of Johannesburg, then they give us prosecutorial rights so that we can prosecute cases of hijacked buildings, of these hijackers. Let us have our own prisons because there was no political will.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, as a South African, hijacking of building has to really be treated as high treason.
Yeah.
25 years, no parole, so that these hijackers can understand.
To deter them, yeah.
No.
Because you might understand, I mean, the reason why I'm asking you how it comes to that is because of your point that, you know, you said that there should be sanctions against the owners of private buildings who just abandoned those buildings. So in this instance, the city is the deserter. The city deserted that building and left it to become what it is today.
Yes, let's say if you're a mayor or you want to take over this building and refurbish it. Now what happens is now you have these NGOs and so-called human rights lawyers.
Who fight against
as much as people live under deplorable conditions where, in fact, I don't understand why the Human Rights Commission themselves would allow human beings to live under those conditions. I find it, for me, quite weird.
So
but then they are saying, no, you can't, as much as you have the private sector that's prepared to build affordable accommodation where people can live in dignity. Now they block you. They say, no, you must leave these people alone. They says, no, you must find them alternative accommodation and what, within 10-kilometer radius.
Because of the child's school,
they make
where
it actually
they work.
impossible. Yes. But then civil society will also buy into this nonsense of really making it impossible for the city.
But I have to come in there, Mr. Mashaba. It's the law. The law says even I, as a landlord, a private building, or maybe I have a house at a complex, if I am going to, before a lease agreement, if we don't have a lease agreement, for instance, tell someone to leave my property, I have to, by law, you know, make sure that they have an alternative accommodation with the 10 parameters that you're talking about. So maybe the law should change? Is that where you're going?
Look, if South Africans, we are prepared to live with laws that are chaotic, because if it is a law, it is a chaotic law, then as South Africans, then we must accept the consequences. The government, the parliament has got the responsibility to pass laws that are going to speak to the lived experience of South Africans. Now, if we pass laws that are going to subject us to murder like this, then we must accept the consequences. Let's look at ourselves as voters. We've lived with this government for the last 29 years. We allow them to pass laws that don't make sense, that are subjecting us to drugs, to all manner of evil and illegality, and we're prepared to live with us. Then we must accept the consequences. If it is the law, then the parliament must then pass laws to ensure that the laws must speak to our lived experience.
So clearly this, Mr. Mashaba, is not only a crisis around hijacked buildings in the city of Joburg, etc. It's a humanitarian crisis.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the questions I used to ask, and in fact I'm asking it even right now, you know, I remember when I was a mayor, I used to call upon this Black Lives Matter projects all over the world, and I said, but how black must you be to attract the attention of these people? Because I used to actually show and invite them to some of these buildings where you see human trafficking. Human trafficking, Maseko, you see it in the city of Johannesburg. You'll be ashamed of yourself to being South African. Young girls lived under Western slaves, you know. It's happening now, and us as South Africans, we are happy to continue drinking champagnes and expensive whiskies and think it's a normal life. I'm afraid it's a ticking time bomb. If we're not going to do something about it, we will have one crisis after the other, and we must never blame. We can blame apartheid, we can blame colonialism. Unfortunately, you know what? It's not fair. We must pass laws that must speak to our living experience.
And of course, because you start looking reactionary, maybe it's time then for different departments to stop working in silo when it comes to this crisis in Johannesburg. Home Affairs should step in. The police is saying this is not our problem unless the municipality says the building is condemned. But we all see you know, people getting into buildings that you can see clearly is dilapidated. So maybe it should be a a multifaceted type of approach to this crisis?
It started national government. Let me give you an example. Some of the raids we used to carry out as metro. You know, as a metro municipality, for you to carry out a raid on a hijacked building, you know, you've got to be accompanied by subs. By law. So you can't on our own, so we have to coordinate it with subs. Are you aware the province and national government on many occasions used to refuse to give us the necessary support?
And you can't take the metro, you have to take national
police. We cannot by law on our own as a metro to go and raid.
JMP,
we know there's crime happening there. The only time we must actually conduct this raid, we must get the support of subs, and then now subs controlled by province and national, because senior politicians are involved in part of this hijacking syndicate. Then the block...
That's what I was going to ask you, but we've run out of time, about who exactly it's benefiting for this crisis not to be sorted, because clearly it's benefiting someone that the crisis continues. And Dr. Herman Mashaba, the leader of ActionSA and former mayor of Johannesburg, in conversation with us. Thank you very much for your time.